So now Trump is giving Putin 12 days. That's new and totally unexpected, but is it too early to celebrate?
Well, I don't know. I suppose we can look for things to celebrate. What's wrong with celebrating? We thought that it was going to be 60 days, 50 days, plus minus 2 weeks. Who knows? We've known. On some level, it's frustrating because prior to this, it seemed like there was at least going to be a certain amount of stability, whether it's good or bad, but there was some kind of predictability that Trump is not going to do anything for 50 days. But now we see that stability just doesn't work for Trump on any level. It's questionable why he made such an announcement because his MAGA crowd certainly doesn't like it. They don't want him to be more involved. They don't want him to be more interested in, that's not America first in their mind. But Trump decides what America first is. So I guess if he says that that's what it is, then that's what it is. And perhaps this is an attempt to call for more leadership. Like people have lost kind of they stopped looking at him as a leader because for 50 days, clearly, I mean, it seems pretty obvious that Trump is rolling over for Putin. And Trump may not like the fact that it clearly looks that way. And so, therefore, he might want to ratchet up his rhetoric in order to see more leader-like. On the other hand, this could be something that I've discussed in this stream and in others ones as well. And I don't know that President listened to me, but I'm sure that this thought idea has occurred to many people. If Donald Trump could stop the war in Ukraine, people might forget about Epstein for a while. And I think that the matter of distraction of attention from the Epstein scandal is something that is very much a priority for this president. To the point, I mean, it's clear from the reporters' questions when they ask him about the deal with European Union about 15% tariffs, and the reporters ask him, "Is this because of you trying to change the subject from the Epstein case?" To which Trump said, "You got to be kidding me." Yeah, I mean it depends who's the kidder here, but that's kind of very realistic to ask those questions. We know if Trump was in this situation, he would certainly say this is just an attempt to change the conversation. But it is an effective way to change the conversation, and I hope there will be more ways of changing the conversation because Ukraine could really use some help, and Trump could really use change of subject. So, and the final reason why he possibly could have said that is simply who he's standing next to. He's made that announcement standing next to Keir Starmer, and clearly he's speaking to Europeans. He's in Europe. And one amazing thing about Donald Trump, he matches the audience. When he speaks to MAGA, he sounds MAGA. When he speaks to ABC News reporters, he sounds like an intelligible human being, or at least he tries. He tries to kind of match what they expect of him. And in this setting, they expect him to show that he's supporting Ukraine. And on some level, at least with words, and I think he delivered. I think this is why it's so important to be next to Trump and and put things in his brain. At the same time, he quoted having a conversation with Putin, and then he's planning on having a conversation with Zelensky next. Those are all good things, and that makes me think of perhaps the fifth reason why this announcement could have been made, which is everybody has bent their knee to Trump, more or less. Japan, European Union, Canada is being kind of funky, but we'll see. But it's not like Trump really is concerned about Canada respecting him. But all the serious players are respecting Trump, and except for Putin. Putin is the one who just doesn't get it. He doesn't understand how great Trump is. And I think that's a really nice way it's a nice kind of idea to develop inside Trump's brain. That everybody respects him and thinks that he is the greatest and would like to give him that Nobel Peace Prize, which could be the reason number 6 why he made that announcement, is that except for Vladimir Putin. And Trump has said that he stops a war on average of once a month for the last 6 months. Besides that being a crazily inaccurate statement, insanely inaccurate statement, it really highlights his interest in having an appearance of peace. Now, you can't say that all the ice on our streets, and this is not, I'm not talking about frozen water, I'm talking about immigration customs enforcement agents whose budget now has been approved to be 4 times of FBI. That's not peace on American streets when we're looking to pick up people who came to court and arrest them and all the things that go with that. But that's not how Nobel Peace Prize is awarded, probably, right? That it's not for that. Although who knows? Barack Obama, in opinion of Donald Trump, received it without having earned it in the first place. So what does that mean if you have army on the streets of your own cities? Who cares? At least I'm being sarcastic. But Trump, according to him, stopped 6 wars so far, once a month. And he's clearly interested in being known as a peacemaker. And it's this one Vladimir Putin who just doesn't, listen to Trump.
Yeah, it's true. And Trump says he all understand all about Putin. I mean, and if Trump already know what he wants, why wait 2 more weeks? Is Putin's final warning?
I think it's not about Trump doing anything so much as it is about him coming to realization that Putin is not going to stop. And it doesn't, I mean, we know that Trump doesn't like artificial intelligence. He says he doesn't like anything with the word artificial in it. I don't know. He likes women with artificial things in them, but that's details. But artificial intelligence will say that there's a less than 5% chance that Ukraine will win the war this year. And there's less than 10% chance that Russia will win war this year. And neither one, is being listened to in Kremlin clearly. So I think that Trump was hoping that Putin would understand that he is in a dead end, that he's not going anywhere. And fine, let's give him 2 more months and he'll understand. But now it's been a few more days and there's no understanding. It's the same Putin as before. And I think Trump, for all the reasons that we listed, is starting to look at Putin a little differently, and change and issue perhaps a different deadline. The question is, of course, what's going to happen after that deadline. So we have 10 to 12 days, and then 2 more weeks, and then 2 more weeks. But we know what needs to be done. And we know how Trump does it. We know that there are sanctions that needs to be put on Russia, and we know that there's weapons that need to be delivered to Ukraine. And and we know how Trump does it, which is with tariffs. And so far, he hasn't put in 10% tariffs on Russia like he has put on everybody else, including Ukraine. So until he puts 10% tariffs on Russia, and I'm not saying there's anything we want to buy from Russia, I just want to see that his money is where his mouth is, and that he stands behind. Well, I mean, who am I talking about here? But I think until we see some actions, we still are hearing just words. But these are very interesting words that were not necessarily expected. And that's one thing you can count on Trump, words that you did not think were expected. And simply because if you listen to him, he said 50 days, but who said 50 days? One thing that worries me, though, here, and that's Trump's constant statement that this is Biden's war. This is not my war. This is Biden's war. And that really, I think, is a very strange statement from President of the freaking United States, because this is national security of the United States, and you are president of the United States, just like the last guy before you was president of the United States. That's your freaking job. Do it. And if this was his war and you're president of the same corporation, you can't change management and now we don't offer those services anymore. This is not a hotel. And this is something that Donald Trump is really struggling to understand. And he thinks that change of management means that this is a totally different new world and nothing new applies. And then nothing applies here from the past. And this is also an opportunity for him to try to get out of it. Because if Putin is not making peace, Ukraine is not changing its position. And so Trump looks like a loser. He doesn't want to look like a loser. That's bad. So what does he do in those situations when he looks like a loser? He gets out. Whether through bankruptcy, whether through health scare, whether through announcing that this is not his war, but Biden's war. To me, this is all Trump creating a window for himself to jump out of and to avoid dealing with Russia. So I don't see still anything that Trump even said, even in those changes of direction where I would say, yep, now he's going to put pressure on Putin. I'm hearing that he's saying I'm failing and I'm going to get the hell out of here.
All people try to understand this thing, and maybe we talk about China too, because if there is no peace in 12 days, will Trump hit China, Brazil, and India with tariffs? Some reports say the US and China are close to a deal, and they trade war might end soon. That doesn't really add up, does it?
Well, in Trump math, everything adds up if you want it to. It just depends what's the outcome that you're looking for. I think bringing China into this conversation is an interesting variable because we know that Trump is debating and pretty much wants to go for his Yalta 2 conference in Beijing, where he and Putin and Xi Jinping can, divide the world into three pieces. And this is so silly because, first of all, you see that there's somebody like Erdogan from Turkey that's like knocking on the door and wants to be the fourth in there, or just let's meet in Istanbul. There's Turkey. Turkey would like to be number 4. But there's also a component of what's going to happen. So let's say they decide that Europe belongs to who? Because Putin wants Europe and China wants Europe. So who does Europe belong to? Of course, we know that Europe belongs to the United States. No, just kidding. They probably think that they belong to themselves, but that's where you need to spend money. And again, build up your army, which was not the case before, because before there was United States, but now the world has changed and now Europe has to militarize. But which is a scary thing, historically speaking. But I wonder if the statement about 10, 12 days has something to do with wanting to get things wrapped up sooner so that Trump would have more options about going to Beijing. Because if there is 50 days, it's not clear what Putin's doing. Trump's got to make plans for travel. And it's like the meeting is Beijing is like the day after 50 days runs out. There's some questions there. But if you can get it wrapped up now in the next, then that could be really impressive. Again, this is all just seems like while we're discussing anything, there's a part of me that goes, well, what about the Epstein case? We know that Speaker Johnson sent all the Republican representatives, the House, on summer vacation. And they said that Trump has to figure out the Epstein case during August, because if not, when they come back in September, they're going to have to deal with it. They don't want to deal with it. So maybe this is another opportunity to distract our attention. I mean, if there is peace between Ukraine and Russia, I think there will be a lot of people who might say they might say that just publish the damn papers. And I think that might be an interesting situation where Trump is fundamentally, how can I say, he's not able to change the topic. Epstein is going to be with Trump until the end. Because the story every day until Trump allows the documents to be published, even if there's nothing there, but it seems like there probably is because he seems certainly scared about it. Because of the 10 or 15 year close friendship between Epstein and Trump, there's going to be lots of information every day. And so that's what we're seeing. And I think that if peace between Russia and Ukraine can change the topic, and peace in Gaza, I think it's debatable which one would be more powerful. But I think those two things really are Trump's best bet at trying to change the topic.
Okay, let's try to speak about Europe. You started, and I want to continue because we have interesting situation about Trump and Europe. Trump just eat Europe. That's the tone of headlines in Bloomberg right now. A humiliating deal that put the EU in a submissive position. Was this really a case of the stronger side focusing the weaker one to agree, just to avoid something worse?
I think that there's public relations and then there's reality. And I think in public relations, Europe is looking very weak. Europe looks like it's submitting to Trump, and it's reasonable why it makes sense why we see such passionate response from the French, who are not happy with this deal at all, and are being some of the most critical voices we've heard so far. But there's reality that Trump goes around. He seems a little crazy. And you make a deal with him that's kind of like you come out and say, "We made a deal," and you do like jazz hands or something. And then you say, "Okay, 15%, 15%." And then you go away, and that's it. And then everybody goes, "But we have questions. There's details." No, we're going to have to work this out. Is this something where we're going to have like a 15%, something, and then it's going to be decided in terms of negotiations for a long time, where the effects are going to be more negligible? Perhaps. But I think PR wise, yes, Europe is looking weak. But I think long term, United States is weakening itself, because these tariffs, which are really a punishment for American consumers, is going to make poorer people in the United States. And so this is a defeat for the United States as well, because tariffs are a bad thing, just period. Just like, let's start with that. And they don't work. This is why people got rid of them. And Trump, with his 6 times bankruptcy, should know better than to do business. But he can't. That's just all he understands. Selling, buying, real estate, developing. It's like, and women. That's all he knows, apparently. And hashtag Epstein. But I think that Europe is going to be really, I feel like, more fine than the United States right now in the long run, because United States is dealing with Trump every day. And Europe is dealing with Trump from time to time and on certain issues. And of course, if you don't smack a bully, he is going to come back again and again and again. And that's the big problem here. We see that Trump, when he was paid ransom money practically by news organizations so that he would leave them alone, he didn't leave them alone and just showed to them that they're weak. And so that's what he explores: weakness and exploits weakness. We see this from his individual meetings to his business dealings, but it's all very short-term gain. Part of the reason he's such a poor businessman is because he doesn't have long-term thinking that is required in trying to build a trusting business where people will trust you long-term. It's about making money right now, and pumping cash out of a business is not a long-term solution, not long sustainable solution. So I think Europe is being very practical here, and they're doing the same thing they did with NATO, where they're saying, "Oh, yes, the amazing Trump. Oh, you are the top." And then they go and do their own thing, like they're helping Ukraine, or they're calling 5% that they're paying for NATO, but they're actually spending the money on Ukraine. This is similar, but it's now starting to cost money. And at some point, if Europe doesn't say no, Trump's going to come back and will want 20, 30% or something else. Because if you said yes once, you're likely to say yes again. But this is the same challenge that Ukraine is, interestingly enough, dealing with, which is, on one, how do you build a good relation with Trump? Where on one hand, you got to give him something that he wants. On the other hand, you can't, because you can't totally, break off the relationship, essentially. That doesn't work. You like the things that I'm saying, I wouldn't be saying if I was president of Ukraine, because we have different positions. But you have to deal with the United States somehow. And I think everybody's trying to kind of poke this kind of way around of how United States and Trump works. But in the process, it kind of makes some kind of, European Union at the moment is looking weak for bending its knee to Trump, but who knows what will happen next.
Yeah, it's true, but Ursula von der Leyen call it the best possible option. But best from whom? Washington or Brussels? Does this deal show how deeply the EU depends on the US for defense, energy, and even political direction?
As well as markets. We're just a big marketplace. We buy a lot of stuff. We use a lot of things. We're consumers to the core. That's our civilization or value. It's a little interesting, because I guess nobody before Trump, or at least it's been a while, maybe like late 19th century to early 20th century, where you have American president who basically says, "I have a big gun. This is a dark alley, and I'm letting people through for free. The hell's wrong with me?" No, I got to charge people. And it's also classic Trump because the developer real estate Trump is about charging for access. If you want to have access to our American marketplace, you got to pay. And if you're Europe, then you got to, he already said that it's going to be 15% to 50%. So this way, if European Union didn't get 50%, they all have, and it's so crazy because it's this number 5 that Trump loves. So either you get 15% or you get 50%, but you still get a 5. And Europe didn't get 50; they got 15. So that means they're in good standing with Donald. He must like them a lot. It's also kind of reminds me of what Putin is doing a little bit when he is breaking in, breaking things, trying to annex territories, and people just kind of figure out what to do with it so that you don't go again. Like, how do you manage this relationship? And the only thing that is better about the United States at the moment is that last I heard, we have elections and constitution, which means Trump can't run again. But in Russia, this kind of attitude just leads to more and more abuse. At least we are limited by certain things, so which we are really counting on to do their work.
Now it looks like this. Trump made EU countries increase defense spending and now made them buy EU's weapons. Is that really what happening? Honestly, it looks like kind of genius.
I don't know if it looks like genius or not, but it's we see that Europe is again, they're trying to placate Trump and they're trying to help Ukraine because they know the same way that China can't let Russia lose, Europe can't let Ukraine lose. And so they're in the same position. So they're doing what they're doing that they can. They've got their 5% deal. And Trump is looking good in this because I mean, it's sad because rather than being a leader of the free world, we are now a supplier. But for Trump base, that's a better way to be because that means you're not actively, well, you still are dragging the world into World War III, which is the craziest thing because the only thing that's dragging world into World War III is Russia. Just let again another thing that I think needs to be clarified because I get comments on our videos, our conversations, Ladislav, and I go, are people paying attention? Because if you're MAGA and you think that you are protecting the world from World War III by supporting friendship with Russia, you're crazy. Europe is doing what it can, and as long as actions are now being taken and expected to be taken by Europe, I have more confidence that it's going to occur than if it's actions that are expected from our 47th president. We've spent most of, chunk of our time discussing his words about words of Putin and actions of Putin is having actions. We see what Putin is doing and Trump is speaking. However, if all is needed is his blessing and then European countries can do the rest of the work, then I think there's a good chance of this happening. And perhaps that is the genius of this. This is passing the torch. The United States is no longer the leader, is giving the leadership torch to Europe so that it can continue the leadership, being leader of the free world. And we know leader of the free world is the country or the union that helps Ukraine. Go everybody. I just think that it would be nice if United States was at least a good supplier so that when we say that we're going to provide weapons, we don't say, well, but it takes us 6 months to make one Patriot system. You're America or what? I feel like I am really kind of frustrated here, but I thought, President Biden said that there's nothing that we cannot do when we, as Americans, when we decide when we work together. Apparently, that's not the case anymore. Apparently, America, Trump was right. America can't do anything. Or is it just the leadership? I don't know.
Trump is giving Putin 12 days. That's new and totally unexpected, but is it too early to celebrate?
Very much so, because for the most part, we had President Trump arriving for his meeting with the UK Prime Minister this morning, and just outside the door, he announced in response to a question that he would be shortening the 50-day period to something shorter. And then inside the building, once they sat down and President Trump, I believe, had over an hour where he spoke to the press, in one of the questions in response, he mentioned that he would be shortening the 50-day period to some point between 10 and 12 days starting today. So we have a specific date that he's looking at, meaning no later than the second week of August, and we do not have any more input or details from there. So we'd have nothing from the State Department, nothing from the National Security Council. This is all something that's going to be very much discussed this week as reporters try to get more details about this, or even in today's press briefing at the State Department, trying to get some kind of announcement about what this means.
Yeah, but when I look at that picture where Trump is talking about all this thing, I think he maybe some sad because they talk like Putin is bad. Yeah, and maybe it's final. It's finished. 12 days, no more. Oh, like this. But my question is, if Trump already knows what he wants, why wait 2 more weeks? Is this Putin's final warning?
Very much seems so. A lot of what we heard today were repetitions of anecdotes that he had before, including the one that he repeated at the NATO press conference, where he said that, oh, the last time I spoke to President Putin, he said that he called me and said, how can I help with what's happening in Iran? And President Trump responded, I don't want you to help with what's happening in Ukraine, not in Iran. And so you repeated that again today. There was a lot of repetition about the past phone calls and how many other conflicts Trump was successful. He mentioned how he was successful with negotiating a ceasefire with Cambodia and Thailand, which we'll see if that holds. He mentioned that Rwanda and Congo peace agreement, which is in the treaty at this point, but hopefully that stays longer. So President Trump mentioned that he has been using tariffs and trade as a method of being successful in stopping wars. He again mentioned the thousands of people he says that die every day in Ukraine and Russia. And I believe the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom said that it was higher than what President Trump was saying, even because we know that the UK estimates are higher than other intelligence outfits. So we'll see what happens of this, but it seems that he made this announcement. He relied on a lot of his previous anecdotes, but there weren't any details. So even in what you're saying that he was sad, that has been again a repeat of what he's been saying since his first phone call in late February with President Putin, and constantly repeating the fact that he couldn't get to the deal. He tried to make a deal. He's not being able to make a deal, and so he mentioned secondary sanctions today.
Yeah, but Andrei, I think in this topic we have one big problem. I talk about China
Yes.
because if there is no peace in 12 days, will Trump hit China, Brazil, and India with tariffs? Some rappers say the US and China are close to a deal, and their trade war might end soon. That doesn't really add up, doesn't it?
Yeah, we have a lot of things happening as far as tariffs. Obviously, we've had a lot of deals announced in the last week. Deals the United States made with Japan and the EU today was announced. A lot of these things we don't have the details though, because a lot of these deals require the parliaments of those countries to vote on them, and I don't think a lot of the deals, as we've been explained to them to us, we can't imagine that the parliaments are going to agree to this. So as far as what's happening with China, however, we have seen the numbers of tariffs go up and down radically. One of the things that's being discussed on American business news shows is the fact that we had a minimum tariff for goods that are $800 and less, called a de minimis tariff, that had been exempted for many years of these kind of goods. So cheap Chinese products to the United States and elsewhere, but especially to the United States, our tariffs didn't apply to any of them. And as of the Big Beautiful Bill and an executive order from April, but now added to in the Big Beautiful Bill, now all those cheap goods are being tariffed. And we'll see exactly what's going to happen as far as the negotiations. The China want its cheap goods coming to the United States? Is it interested in higher yield, higher costing goods? What exactly is China going to protect in these tariffs? And as part of the negotiation, as you mentioned, there are international negotiations as well. Part of the deal with the EU that was announced today was the fact that the EU would be buying fossil fuels from the United States, be that oil or natural gas. That is something that's not so much a business deal with the United States. That's also a national security consideration, given the fact that there are countries in the EU that are still determined on buying fossil fuels from Russia. So similarly, in the negotiations with tariffs with China, it's also going to be a negotiation of what they can do to help the United States and what its eventual goals are. And we've seen not only proposals from Erdogan in terms of hosting a peace summit, but we've also heard that President Trump can go visit China and meet with Putin in China. So I think both of these things are still options on the table, and we won't know until we get closer to September and October, when many more tariffs that were announced by President Trump are supposed to come into effect. Because on August 1st, we were supposed to have higher tariffs on China, but that seems to be delayed again, as far as the United States is saying.
Would it make sense to pressure only Russia and not China? What's your take?
Well, there's two sides to this, right? We know how much China is supplying Russia right now. So whether it's the chips in their rocketry,
but China says we don't do this.
Yeah.
We don't do this.
Right. I think President Zelensky's right. If China were to back out of this war, Russia would have to give up. It's clearly. But also, it was very noticeable a couple of weeks ago when the Chinese foreign minister says that their goal is not a Russian victory, but they're not interested in Russia losing. So, so it seems like China has a different plan. And in fact, one of the conversations I was having with somebody in Washington the other week was how does this all impact Taiwan? And is it more likely or not that Russia is interested in prolonging the conflict in Ukraine, meaning prolonging Russia's attack on Ukraine? That's what we should call it. And at the same time, plan for that right now, as it looks like the United States and Europe haven't increased their defense production. They are sending a lot of material to Ukraine. Would not it be better for China to strike Taiwan in the next 2 years, as opposed to when Europe and the United States use that 5% GDP and finally get to that point and are actually producing things? So China might have different goals here, as opposed to what Russia is doing in Ukraine, and China may be using the war to expend the ability for the United States and other countries to help Taiwan.
Okay, and I want to ask about Europe. Just look at this. Trump just eat Europe. That's the tone of headlines in Bloomberg right now. A humiliating deal that's put the EU in a submissive position. Was this really a case of the stronger side focusing the weaker one to agree, just to avoid something worse?
Well, that's being said because, of course, President Trump announced the deal with the UK, the United Kingdom, more than a month ago, where their minimum tariffs were 10%. Here, with the EU, there's a minimum tariff of 15%, and so many people who support President Trump are saying that he clearly the EU made a mistake and they should have accepted earlier. But again, we have no knowledge of what these actual deals are. And one of the most puzzling things, there were two deals announced in the last week. This EU is being the second, the first one being Japan last week. And there are significant investments listed in both of those deals, as far as the press release, because again, we don't know the details. But there are press releases that there will be investments by both the EU and Japan into the United States. And we have no idea what this means, because it is being signaled to us that it does not mean investment in companies and building factories in the United States. It may mean an investment into a sovereign wealth fund that President Trump is starting. And especially as far as the Japan deal, there has been specific language in the press release that President Trump will have full control over where these funds are being spent. So even whether you're talking about Japan or the UK or the EU, we just don't know anything concrete, because these deals are supposed to take 2.5 years to work out. Them being rushed, and we are getting the announcement of a framework decision. These deals might not come into force for another year or a year and a half, given the fact that a lot of these specific points need to be negotiated further on the sentence by sentence, on the this kind of machine part versus that kind of machine part being tariffed. So we might not know for a long time exactly what's in these deals.
Mhm. Okay, but Ursula von der Leyen call it the best possible option, but best for whom?
Yes.
Washington or Brussels? Does this deal show how deeply the EU depends on the US for defense, energy, and even political direction?
I think mostly it demonstrates how much this administration in the United States is stymieing trade. So we are putting tariffs across various countries. We have stopped a lot of shipments coming in from Japan after that Liberation Day, where the stock market cratered and then
Yeah.
rebounded now to its highest point. But a lot of these decisions being made by the White House have severely interrupted international trade. And I think what Europe wants more than anything, being one of the wealthiest conglomerates of countries in the world, is making sure trade happens, because increasing trade increases wealth. Tariffs decrease trade and decrease wealth. So even with the 15%, that is better than the 30% that was on the table from the United States. So I don't see this much of a capitulation. And again, a lot of this will depend on what the actual details are. There are many things that are being talked about that are being excluded. There are questions about European wines, European auto manufacturers. What exactly is being tariffed and what is not? We don't know exactly yet. And so I think once we finally have the details, then we can tell who was the winner, who wasn't.
Okay, about weapon. Now it look like this. Trump made EU countries increase defense spending, and now made them buy EU's weapons. Is this really what happening? Honestly, it looks like a kind of genius.
It is, once we actually see what happens. I think still at this point, the best way of getting weapons to Ukraine is for individual countries to send what they have already in their armed forces supply now, and then work on getting that reimbursed or refilled later on with purchasing new weapons from the United States. I don't think a lot of countries in Europe, particularly France, I know Italy also aired some reservations about spending money on American weapons, given the fact that they both have very sizable arms manufacturing capabilities of their own that they want to invest and have jobs in their country, not in the United States. So I think a lot of these details, again, something that was announced by President Trump with Mark Rutte, we did not get the full details. It does not seem that all the nations were together on this. This was simply a conversation from Rutte with having buy-in with a lot of countries. But in the end, a lot of the details still have to be worked out. So in the meantime, what we're going to see is countries sending weapons that they already have and then purchasing either from their own domestic suppliers or the United States their replacement.
Mhm. In media, we talk about one more risk, and I mean, at the same time, there's fear that the US might pull its troops from Europe, which could provoke Putin. How do you see that risk?
Oh, well, this is something that's been proposed by the United States in the first administration of Trump, but especially before even the inauguration. We know that's something that Pete Hegseth has been talking about for years. We don't know if he's going to stay on as Secretary of Defense, but it is interesting that we still have a Supreme Allied Commander that is from the United States. We just had Commander Grynkevich take over as Supreme Allied Commander. That is something also the United States talked about, possibly not having the United States be the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO and have another country take over that. They've also talked about combining European Command with African Command. That would be over nearly 200 nations under one command, which is a little absurd. But if you're talking about reducing the amount of military, then that makes sense. There's a dichotomy with President Trump where he says that he wants to show peace through strength and the best weapons and the best army, but at the same time, he thinks that he can decrease the size of the army and decrease the amount of spending. So we don't know where that meets reality with his definition. But that's something that we have yet to see that in a lot of countries.
Okay.
We saw force reduction during President Trump's first term, but we haven't seen it yet this term. I know South Korea is thinking about that. Japan is thinking about that, as well as Europe.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and one more important thing. What's your view on the situation around NABU and SAP, Ukraine's anti-corruption bodies? What do you know about the latest development there?
Well, we've heard that the new bill is being proposed in Verkhovna Rada. For me, being outside Ukraine, my concern is that it does for if you're outside Ukraine, it doesn't matter if you're President Zelensky and his office, or you're the people in the streets asking for something different, or you're the Verkhovna Rada. All of that is Ukraine. All of that is Ukraine if you're outside. So for me, it was, where does Ukraine end up after this? And I think the activists, journalists, and activists, either Ukrainian or Western, who work in Ukraine or are interested in Ukraine, we've done as good a job as possible explaining to other media what exactly happened in Ukraine and how different Ukraine is from Russia. So why was Russia passing laws at the same time banning the use of a VPN, and it would cost $1,000 if you would do that in Russia, while at the same time Ukraine passed a law in full openness. So the parliament passed something. It wasn't done in the best way, sure, but it was. We saw that there was a vote happen. We heard that the president signed it. We almost immediately had protests for the next 48 hours, and almost immediately a reaction from the presidency. There's no more democratic demonstration to the world that Ukraine is a democracy. It's not, as J.D. Vance said, a autocracy or dictatorship. It's clear that Ukrainians have the right to protest. Ukrainians have the right to be involved in politics. And I think in the end, Ukraine ends up in a better place, because not only should we have a better law in the end, but also our image is increased as far as differentiating ourselves between the kind of laws and protests we have in Ukraine versus what happens in Russia.
Yeah, it's look like local political battle, but it's very risky
Yes.
for us. Yeah. So is Zelensky internal battle with anti-corruption institutional already hurting Ukraine position? The EU is speaking out, but Trump is staying silent.
Yeah, I don't think Trump really understands or cares about what's happening in terms of internal battle, unless he can use that for political reasons. But we've seen only his far right MAGA fanatics like Marjorie Taylor Greene make comments about this. Again, in the end, we can demonstrate that Ukraine isn't a dictatorship, and if there was an issue with this law, clearly it is being addressed democratically. As far as what other European leaders are saying, I didn't really hear anything that bad from the G7. I saw that they were determined to work with Ukrainian officials, include a dialogue. I think the biggest thing for Ukraine is to demonstrate that not only will President Zelensky's office have a meeting with all law enforcement bodies, which is what he did almost immediately after the bill was signed, but definitely have some kind of constructive dialogue with civil service groups, those kind of Hromadske organizations that are interested in anti-corruption reform. Also, I think one thing that would really changes perspective, again, if you're outside Ukraine, is this is one of many law enforcement bodies in Ukraine, and there are very good arguments being proposed in Western press about why exactly is there yet another. Why are there so many law enforcement bodies, separate prosecutors, and wouldn't they be fighting against each other? Shouldn't Ukraine work towards a bill or a change to its constitution to actually figure out how many law enforcement bodies you need to have? And as well as one thing that reflects on American perspective is this is the closest that the NABU is, and the SAPO would be an independent special prosecutor in the United States, which we don't have, but we assign them for specific cases. And traditionally, the American public has not been favorable about independent counsel investigations that go on for many years. Here, NABU and SAPO has been operating for over 10 years in this new way. So I think there's a lot that Ukraine can work towards understanding with the rest of the world. But at this point, I think overall, Ukraine comes out on top.
But media on the West, as and many people in Ukraine, when Trump wants to, he steps in. Many say his silence actually pushed Zelensky to act.
I don't believe that because I haven't seen him having demonstrating that much interest. I actually haven't heard much about the State Department or any international bodies coming in here. It's also interesting that this happened almost immediately after the change of government. So we have now different people accountable for this. Who was talking to Shmihal now as the defense secretary? Maybe there were some outside people trying to work with him because they knew him as the longest serving prime minister. Maybe Ms. Sverdenko's position as the deputy prime minister, maybe her role with signing the minerals deal allowed her to have more input from Americans that way. I don't think we really know who changed whose mind here, but in the end, for me, it's about whether it's Zelensky, the people in the street, the office of the president, or the Verkhovna Rada. All of that is Ukraine outside of Ukraine. And I need to make sure that the rest of the world understands that what Ukraine is doing, whether there are disagreements, it's all towards the same goal, which is a fight against corruption, and that there is only one enemy, and that's attacking Ukraine right now.